Welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Mary Elizabeth Williams, and what a thrill. Today I'm sitting next to Willem Dafoe. He is a 4-time Oscar nominee, multiple Golden Globes, SAG Awards, Indie Spirit, all of the awards, all of the nominations. He's appeared in over 150 films. You were in 7 films this year, Willem. Do you know that you were in 7 films this year alone?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know him from everything from Antichrist to Last Temptation of Christ to Finding Nemo, Spider-Man to The Lighthouse, all the classics and the cult hits. And now his newest film from acclaimed director Yorgos Lanthimos is called Poor Things. What a movie, what a ride. Talk to me about this movie and your unique sort of Dr. Frankenstein-like character, but also something else.
It's always difficult to talk about the movie because I don't know what spoilers are. I don't know what ruins the movie for an audience and what, what's their appetite to see a movie.
Okay, but we meet you in the first few minutes of the film, so that's not a spoiler.
Yeah, okay. You meet me and I'm in my house. It's a Victorian period. I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, and I'm scarred. We find out later that my father has experimented on me. He was also a scientist, a doctor, and I deal in cadavers and such things for my work. And I received this cadaver, and there's a child. This woman is pregnant. She suicided, and I think this is a great opportunity. Being a man of science, why don't I put the baby's brain in this woman's body? And that's where we start, basically.
And that's where we begin. I'm also interested because the accent you do is more Scottish.
Yes.
What is that choice?
That choice sort of comes from the novel. I think he's written as Scottish, and the writer is Scottish. And I think he puts a lot of himself in this character. Who's called Godwin Baxter, and sometimes she calls him God. He's her creator, and for a long time he holds on to her. He sort of falls in love with her. It's a paternal kind of relationship, but it's more than that. And then he realizes he has to let her go at some point, go out into the world. And of course the setup provides you with this woman that's in her body. She's a grown woman, but she's got this brain that learns very quick, and it's not conditioned by social conventions. So she goes out in the world and kind of is a truth teller and is an innocent because she hasn't experienced the world, but she's also very wise because she doesn't have all these accepted truths that are not true. And I think that's sort of the fun of the movie, because you see all these things, her poke holes in all these things that we take as accepted truths and just accept in terms of our identity, in terms of our conformity, and we see ourselves in that. And it's nice to follow her through this journey where she's really realizing herself.
Yeah, it's a coming of age story. It's a Bildungsroman. And it feels to me like inevitable that you would have worked with this director, because you work with directors who work so far outside the box, who really are pushing convention and who are doing really interesting things. Was it the book that drew you to it? Was it the director? Was it the story? Was it the cast?
I've always liked his movies, and it was simple. They came to me. Emma, who was involved very early in this project, Yorgos invited her into it very early. So she has a big hand in the project. They called me up and they basically told me what the story is. And both of them I like a great deal, and I like the general pitch they gave me, so I said, I'm in.
So speaking of people involved in the movie, I read recently from Variety that Mark Ruffalo said that during the making of the film, he was very concerned that he might be replaced by another actor, and you fit him right into that. Well, what did you do, Willem? What did you do to this man?
Listen, Mark is sweet. He also performs his insecurity sometimes. it's kind of half real and half fake. It's kind of half to get reassurance and half just kind of self-deprecating humor. So this goes on, and I think we got to put a stop to this. So he kept on saying, I saw Oscar Isaac around here. He could do my role. You know, maybe he'd better be. He plays this insecurity, right? Which is all part of his character in the end. But I mean, personally plays it. So one day I brought Oscar in, and Oscar made it as if he was called in to replace him, to give him a little fright. So it's a nasty little prank, but we're still friends.
You're quite a trickster. All right, so I had to keep my eye on you. I want to ask about, this film is in some ways it harkens visually and storyline back to some classic horror films, classic movies from the early age of Hollywood. You've also played characters from the early age of Hollywood. You've played in Nosferatu, you played Max Schreck. This is a movie that harkens back to Frankenstein, to Metropolis. What were the movies that when you were growing up, you were watching and saying, I want to do something like that? Because I see a certain through line.
You know, when I was a kid, I was more fixated on the theater. I wasn't the guy that was in the house watching movies. But I will say, I grew up in the Midwest, and one thing, my parents would go to Chicago they had 8 kids, and they both were workaholics, and occasionally they'd go to Chicago, the big city, to have a romantic weekend. And when they were there, they'd buy these little 8mm films that were, shorts from features like Frankenstein and all these horror movies. And I used to play them obsessively. So those were really the first movies I saw. And we had a little projector, and I used to play them backwards. Those were probably the first movies I saw. So maybe that's in there somewhere, but I wasn't really, I was a cinephile much more later in life and much more attracted to film later. My identity was really as a theater actor for many years.
You are, you talk about that, and we know you as a theater guy as well, as one of the founding members of the Worcester Group. You are so rooted in that identity and that part of theater history, Willem. And then I look at your film career, you have directors who you've worked with again and again and again, like Wes Anderson, like Abel Ferrara, like Lars von Trier. That to me speaks to someone who understands repertory.
Yes, first of all, it's obvious you have a shorthand. If you have a good time working with them, there's trust there. They know you, you know them. You can serve them better. They can set you up better. And also there's something beautiful, and this does come from the theater very much. There's a nice thing of being part of the fabric of, a whole body of work, and to see these different characters go through the different films. There's a pleasure to that. I think there's a pleasure for the audience, and there's a pleasure for the actor.
Yeah.
So you get an extra spin on it, because sometimes you can use them iconographically, because you can position them in relationship to previous films, for example.
Yeah, and it becomes, when I think of the work you've done in Wes Anderson films, for example.
You're playing with an image, sort of. Absolutely. Which I don't normally do, but in the context of a body of work, it's fun to do that.
And as someone who comes from that theater background, who has that sort of repertory experience, who likes that dynamic, it's interesting to me that you rarely seem to be interested in going behind the camera. We've interviewed a lot of actors. We interviewed Patricia Arquette earlier this year.
Who I worked with.
Who you worked with just this year.
As a director.
Who directed you earlier this year.
And she was wonderful. She really was.
She's great. So, what is that something that's still on your bucket list of things to do, or you're in your lane? You like where you are?
No, I'm in my lane, and performing is still kind of mysterious and to me, and I never tire of it. It's always different, and just I think I don't want that kind of responsibility. I'm not that. I like, I try to think what turns me on, and it's usually attaching myself to someone who has a vision, and then I try to, my job, my pleasure is trying to embody that vision. It's not necessarily mine, but I come to it, and part of my work is trying to make flesh what they're describing to me, or once they've made a world, to inhabit that world. And I think that's, for me, that's the way I get the most pleasure and I'm the most engaged, because when I have an idea and I want to express it, it often completes itself in a funny way. And I don't want to say it's self-serving, but I'm not into interpreting something that I know and crafting something to tell people that is my experience. I want to have the experience, and I want to have the experience and have it be hopefully honest enough and full enough that people can have it with me by watching me. And in that way, I don't worry so much about, what it means or where we're going. And I feel as a performer, it's really about, so much of performing is about commitment and being present and receiving what's around you. I look at you now, it's, about being receptive and also being flexible and tolerant, and all those things can only happen if you make a trick, you sort of do it for someone else. Because if you do it for yourself, I think you rush to result, and you're also less free. So I hope it doesn't sound like I'm being, I'm flattering myself by saying, well, I do it for the other people, I don't do it for myself, because that's not it. Ultimately, I do it for myself because that's how I function best. When you say, walk across the room, and I do it, and I find pleasure in that action. I find my way to that. If I say, what do I do now? It's a different process. Oh, maybe I'll walk across the room. I immediately start to craft something, and I'm not thrown into the not knowing like you would be when you do it for someone else.
The way that you do it, though, Willem, the characters that you inhabit, the range of these characters. I mean, doing Green Goblin and Norman, being these two characters in the same body, you exhibit this. You refuse to be typecast. You have played detectives and monsters and a fish, Willem. And I saw an old photo of you on Instagram, and my favorite comment on it was someone wrote underneath it, "Everything about Willem Dafoe scares me, and he seems like a lovely person." That's what you bring to everything you do, Willem. How do you avoid being typecast? You could be monsters forever.
Look, I've tried not to be typecast because I just like to have different challenges, and I don't like to sell anything. And once you become a thing, and some people do it beautifully. Some they create a persona, and then they create stories that they can go deeper and they can express that persona. It's one way of making something, but I like to try to bend myself to the situation, because I really am in it for the adventure, in it for the experience. I'm like a little bit like a child that way. But what makes me not a child is I'm serious about it, and I'm very disciplined, and the act of trying to give yourself to the bigger picture is a very adult thing.
Very adult.
And that's what's going to sustain you. And because I think I try very, just naturally to mix up different projects, different sizes of projects, working with new directors, working with directors that have been around for a while. That always, your films get seen differently, how they get distributed. Some movies I've made are very, very underseen. Some movies I've made are seen widely. So you're always developing and being seen in different ways. So you don't get something reflected back to you that puts you in one lane. So hopefully, at least in theory, you're setting yourself up to be seen in different ways. And then different opportunities come.
What's a movie that you've done that you wish more people had seen?
Oh, there's many. There's many. Maybe maybe I'm a crybaby. But, you know, you make a movie and you like it, you feel like it's not seen enough. I mean, and I make a lot of small movies because I like the small team, I like the flexibility, and sometimes the people with the most radical visions and most interesting ways of working aren't you know, seen as commercially viable, so they're working with smaller budgets, quicker shoots, that kind of thing. Those movies, sometimes. You know, I've worked with Abel Ferrara, for example, and, you know, I know people that say, oh, Abel Ferrara, Bad Lieutenant. That's a beautiful film, or it's an interesting film, it's an important film, but he's done so much work since then, and some I've been involved in, and because of distribution, he lives in Europe now, and he's quite well regarded in Europe, but here I find constantly that those films are under distributed.
You talked about living in Europe. You also live at least part of the time in Europe. I just, you know, Angelina Jolie did an interview earlier this week where she said she doesn't want to be in Hollywood anymore because Hollywood is an unhealthy place. And I'm wondering if having that space away from Hollywood, at least part of the time in your life, how does that change your perspective to the work that you seek out and the work that you do, Willem?
You know, I've never been like a Hollywood guy, but I've never not been a Hollywood guy. I've lived there while I've been working on movies. I've never lived there because for many years I was working with this theater company downtown called the Wooster Group for 27 years. Now that's 20 years ago now. But I've never, you know, I've belonged to the community of each individual film. And of course, I'm a part of that film community because I've been working for a little while. But I understand what she says about being unhealthy, but she was in the belly of the beast a lot of the time. And now she's branching out and directing more. And I imagine it's liberating for her to be out of that lane, as you say, that she's been put in a very prominent way. I don't have that same kind of problem. I don't have the kind of celebrity she has. And I've never lived in LA, so socially, I've got a different, the environment that I'm in is different. So I've always traveled a lot because even with the Wooster Group, we used to sometimes tour 4 or 5 months a year. So ever since I've been about 22 years old, I've spent a lot of the year outside of the United States. I love it when I'm here, but I also love to travel, and I go where the work is.
One more question for you. I want to know, because you've been in so many cult films, movies that people hold so close to their hearts that maybe weren't big when they first came out. I want to know, when people come up to you and they're starstruck, what is it? Is it Boondock Saints? Is it American Psycho? What is it?
You know, it depends on the person, obviously. Like Boondock Saints, for a certain, particularly male of a certain age that was probably a teenager, a young man maybe, I don't know when that movie is from. Maybe
1999.
99. If they were of age, let's say a little after that, because it had no release, but it became a cult movie, you know, those are Boondock Saints fans. But out of that demographic, I don't think people are that aware of the movie, okay? So it's very particular. And sometimes I joke, I say, when people come up to me and they want to talk about a movie, I can sometimes tell, you know, what part of my filmography they're familiar with, and probably what part of my filmography they don't know at all, which is cool. I mean, maybe it's a thing of vanity or something, but I like the fact that I have different audiences. And I always felt like this with the theater, that the theater people didn't know about my film career, and the film people didn't know about my theater career, if you call it a career. But, you know, and that does a thing where that keeps you flexible, because then you don't, getting back to doing different kind of work and all that, you don't see yourself as one thing. you see yourself as this moving thing, and you're more conscious of the illusion of creating a persona or a way of working, or what you think you're good at or what you think you're bad at. That's all up for grabs because you keep on getting different things reflected back to you. So that's nothing I've designed. It's something that's happened naturally, you know, because I think always in the projects you choose, it's partly you seeking them and you receiving what's coming towards you, but it's also what's being offered you. So I don't have this master plan, or I don't have these specific career aspirations. I've just kind of bumped along and gone from project to project and always looking for good people and doing stuff that turned me on, and usually with a minimum of worrying about where they fit in the overall, because I've been doing it long enough that I think if it's good work, it's good work, and no matter what happens to it, if you know why you're doing it, you give it your best try. Nobody tries to make a bad movie, and then you kind of let it go. And I think you have to have that kind of, you've got to be able to let things go in order to really be free and make something that isn't something that you already know. You can surprise yourself a little bit more if you don't have pressure to know where you're going or what you're doing. And that's probably why I'm not a director.
Well, all right, so keep doing what you're doing. It seems to be working out very well. And
it's working okay.
It seems like it's working out fine.
But always work better.
And I'm excited for what you're going to do next. But in the meantime, the new one is called Poor Things. It is an absolute wild ride. It is unlike anything else you're going to see this year. Willem Dafoe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.